The great hall of Valdres reeked of fear and power. Airless kept her eyes fixed on the stone floor as guards shoved her forward, their iron grips bruising her arms through the thin fabric of her shift. Around her, the assembled nobility whispered behind gloved hands. "That's her? The Ashenmore Omega? Look at her. Pale as death, she won't survive a fortnight." "Doesn't matter, does it? She only needs to survive long enough for the ritual." Airless forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way her mother had taught her before the sickness claimed her. The hall stretched endlessly, lined with towering pillars carved with wolves mid-hunt. Banners bearing Valdres's silver crest hung from the vaulted ceiling, and everywhere she looked, she saw alphas. Their scents crashed over her in suffocating waves. Dominance, aggression, barely contained violence. Her Omega instinct screamed at her to submit, to bare her throat and cower. She locked her knees and kept walking. At the far end, upon a throne of black iron and bone, sat the Alpha King. Kalen of Valdres was younger than she'd expected. The stories painted him as ancient and monstrous, a warlord who'd united the northern pacts through blood and terror. But the man on the throne couldn't be more than 30 winters, his face hard-cut and handsome in a way that made her stomach clench. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and his eyes, cold and gray as a winter storm, tracked her approach with predatory stillness. He didn't move, didn't speak, simply watched as she was dragged before him and forced to her knees. "The Omega, Your Majesty." Lord Varen stepped forward, his oily voice echoing through the hall. The royal advisor was a thin man with a face like a starved fox. Last of the Ashenmore bloodline, as promised, pure and unclaimed. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Airless felt their eyes crawling over her skin, assessing her like livestock. "She's small," someone muttered. "Are we certain her blood carries the old power?" "The seers have confirmed it." Lord Varen's smile was a terrible thing. "Her lineage traces directly to the first pack. Her blood will serve as the perfect conduit for the barrier ritual." Conduit. Such a clean word for what they intended. Airless had heard the truth from the soldiers who'd dragged her from her home. The barrier protecting Valdres from shadow beasts was failing. To restore it required a sacrifice, an omega of ancient blood, bound to the Alpha King, whose life force would be drained to fuel the magic. She was not a bride. She was a blood bag with a heartbeat. "Rise." The command cut through the hall like a blade. Airless's body obeyed before her mind could protest, her Omega instincts responding to the raw authority in that voice. She found herself standing, swaying slightly, and finally meeting the Alpha King's gaze. Surprise flickered in those gray depths, or maybe curiosity, the way a wolf might study a rabbit that refused to run. "You know why you're here." It wasn't a question. "Yes." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm to be your shield against the darkness, your sacrifice." The crowd gasped at her bluntness. Lord Varen's face twisted with fury, but the Alpha King simply tilted his head, studying her with new interest. "You don't beg," he observed. "Would it change anything?" "No." "Then I won't waste my breath." Airless lifted her chin. "I have one request." Lord Varen sputtered. "You dare make demands of—" "Speak." The Alpha King silenced his advisor without looking away from her. "My sister. Tova. She's 12 years old and alone in Ashenmore. Whatever you do to me, promise she'll be protected, given a home." For a long moment silence hung between them. The Alpha King's expression revealed nothing. Then he rose from his throne, descending the steps with fluid grace. He stopped before her, close enough that his scent washed over her. Pine, wood smoke, and something darker that made her blood sing in ways she didn't understand. "You bargain for another's life," he said quietly, "when you should be bargaining for your own. My life is already forfeit. Hers doesn't have to be." A crack appeared in the ice of his gaze, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Granted. The word was barely a whisper, meant for her ears alone. Then he turned to address the hall. The binding will take place at the next full moon. Until then, the Omega remains under my protection. Any who touch her answer to me? He didn't look at her again as he strode from the hall. But as Lord Varen seized her arm, Airless caught the advisor's whispered words to a nearby noble. Protection. As if it matters. In a fortnight she'll be dead and the barrier restored. The king knows it, even if he won't say it plainly. The noble glanced at her with pity. Does she know what the ritual actually does? Lord Varen's smile was cruel. She will, when it's too late to matter. As they dragged her toward her gilded prison, Airless made herself a promise. She would not die screaming, she would not give them the satisfaction, and somehow, she would make certain Tova survived. 2 days passed before Airless saw her sister again. The chambers they'd given her were beautiful, a cage of silk and velvet, with windows overlooking moonlit mountains. She'd spent 48 hours pacing, planning, and trying not to succumb to despair. A fortnight. That's all she had until the full moon. When Tova finally burst through the door, Airless caught her in an embrace so tight it hurt. The king's soldiers came to Ashenmoor, Tova said, her words muffled against Airless's shoulder. They said you'd arranged it. The king had kept his word. The realization settled strangely in Airless's chest. She'd expected him to forget the moment he left the Great Hall. Instead, he'd sent for her sister within hours of the audience. Why? Airless? Tova pulled back, her young face serious. What's happening? Why are we here? Airless opened her mouth to lie, to craft some gentle fiction. But Tova had always been too clever for comfortable deceptions. I've been chosen for a ritual, she said carefully, to help protect the kingdom. What kind of ritual? The kind that requires sacrifice. Tova's eyes widened with understanding. They're going to kill you. Tova. No. Her sister's voice cracked. I won't let them. I'll find a way to... A sound from the corridor made them both freeze. Footsteps, heavy and uneven, accompanied by labored breathing. Then a crash, as if something large had collided with the wall. Airless moved to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. Your Majesty, you must return to your chambers. Leave me. That voice. The Alpha King. But wrong somehow. Ragged and strained. More footsteps, retreating. Then silence, broken only by harsh breathing just outside her door. Airless knew she should stay hidden. The man on the other side was her captor, her executioner. Whatever was happening to him was none of her concern. But her hand was already reaching for the handle. She opened the door to find the Alpha King slumped against the opposite wall, one hand pressed to his side. Even in dim torchlight she could see the dark stains spreading beneath his fingers. Blood. And with it, a scent that made her stomach lurch. Poison. The same bitter tang that had filled the air when her mother lay dying. His gray eyes found hers, glazed with pain but still sharp. Omega, go back inside. You didn't see this. You're bleeding. An astute observation. He tried to push himself upright and failed. Go. Before. His words dissolved into a growl of agony. The hand pressed to his wound came away black in the torchlight, the blood corrupted somehow. Someone poisoned you, Airless whispered. Someone is always trying to poison me. His laugh was bitter. This time, they may have succeeded. She should listen, should retreat and let fate take its course. If the Alpha King died, perhaps the ritual would be cancelled. Perhaps she and Tova could escape. Instead, she found herself kneeling beside him. What are you doing? He snarled, but there was no strength behind it. Something foolish, Airless admitted. She pulled his hand away and felt her heart stutter. The flesh was blackened around the edges, dark veins spreading outward like cracks in ice. Whatever poison this was, it was eating him alive. And deep in her chest, In the place where her deepest secret lived, warmth stirred. A gift she'd hidden since childhood, when her mother made her swear never to reveal it. "You're going to die," she heard herself say. "I know." His eyes were fluttering closed. "Let me." But even as the words left his lips, his hand shot out with surprising strength, fingers wrapping around her wrist. He pulled her closer, close enough that his breath ghosted across her throat. "You smell," he murmured, his voice slurring. "Like moonlight." "How do you smell like moonlight?" Then, his eyes rolled back, and he went limp in her arms. Airless dragged the Alpha King into her chambers with strength she didn't know she possessed. Tova helped, her small hands gripping his boots. By the time they got him onto the bed, both sisters were panting. "Is he dead?" Tova whispered. Airless pressed her fingers to his throat. A pulse, weak but present. "Not yet." She studied the wound in candlelight, her stomach churning. The blackened flesh had spread further, dark veins now creeping toward his heart. She'd seen poison before, but nothing like this. Something crafted, malevolent, designed for maximum suffering. "We should call someone," Tova said. "The guards or a healer." "No." Airless shook her head. "Whoever did this is still in the castle. If they learn he's vulnerable..." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Airless stared down at the unconscious Alpha, at the man who'd bought her like cattle and planned to drain her blood for a ritual. She should let him die. Every logical part of her screamed that his death was her salvation. But her hands were already moving, pulling away his torn shirt to expose the wound. And as she worked, the warmth in her chest grew stronger, pressing against her ribs like a living thing demanding release. "Tova, guard the door. Don't let anyone in, no matter what you hear." Her sister's eyes widened. "Erlis, are you going to..." "Go." Alone with the dying king, Erlis closed her eyes and reached for the power she'd spent her entire life hiding. It came rushing up like water from a deep well, filling her veins with golden light. When she opened her eyes, her hands were glowing. She'd never tried to heal a wound this severe. But this was a battle against darkness itself. Erlis pressed her palms to his chest and let the light pour into him. The effect was immediate. The poison recoiled from her touch, hissing like a living thing. She could feel it fighting her, its malevolent intelligence pushing back against her healing energy. But she pushed harder, chasing the darkness through his blood. The Alpha King's back arched off the bed. A sound tore from his throat, something between a scream and a howl. And when his eyes snapped open, they weren't gray anymore. They were gold. Airlis jerked backward, but his hand caught her wrist with impossible strength. He sat up in a single fluid motion, moving like something not quite human. Those golden eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that stopped her breath. "Mate," he growled. The word was barely human, more wolf than man. I'm not your mate," Airless stammered. "You're delirious. The poison..." But he wasn't listening. His hand came up to cup her face, his touch searingly hot. He traced the line of her jaw, her cheekbone, her lips, all while making a low sound in his chest that vibrated through her entire body. "Mine," he breathed. "You're mine. I can smell it. Why didn't I feel it before?" "Because you were trying to sacrifice me," Airless said, but her voice came out breathless and wanting in a way that horrified her. His gaze dropped to her throat, and hunger filled his expression, ancient and primal. "Need to claim you. Need to make sure no one else..." "No." Airless tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. "You're not yourself..." He leaned closer, and she could feel his breath hot against the curve of her neck. Every instinct she possessed was screaming, some telling her to flee, others telling her to bare her throat and surrender. "I'm going to claim you," he said, and it wasn't a threat. It was a promise. "You're going to wear my mark for the rest of your life." His teeth pierced her skin. Airly screamed, but the sound strangled in her throat as agony transformed into something else. Heat flooded through her veins, starting at the bite and spreading like wildfire. She felt him everywhere, in her blood, in her bones, in the very essence of her being. The bond snapped into place, a golden thread connecting her soul to his. Then the world went white. When consciousness returned, Airless found herself collapsed across his chest, his arms wrapped around her like iron bands. His heartbeat was strong and steady where it had been faltering before. The wound on his side had closed completely. But her body felt strange, too hot, too sensitive. Every nerve ending was alive in ways she'd never experienced. And deep in her core, something was stirring. "What did you do to me?" she whispered. But the Alpha King was unconscious, truly unconscious this time. And Airless, still trapped in his arms, felt the first wave of heat roll through her body and understood with dawning horror exactly what his bite had triggered. She was going into heat, for the first time in her life, bound to a king who'd meant to kill her. Dawn crept through the windows to find Airless still trapped beneath the sleeping Alpha King. The heat was building. She could feel it in waves, cresting and receding but growing stronger. Her skin felt too tight, too hot. Every breath brought his scent flooding into her lungs, pine and smoke, and something wild that made her want to press closer, even as her mind screamed warnings. This wasn't supposed to happen. Omegas didn't go into heat until they were claimed by a compatible mate. She'd assumed she would die in the ritual unclaimed, untouched by this particular torment. Instead, she was bound to the man who'd bought her for slaughter, and her treacherous body was responding as if this were some twisted fairy tale. "Tova," she called weakly. "Are you there?" The door cracked open, revealing her sister's worried face. "He's alive." Airless extracted herself from the king's grip, wincing as another wave of heat rolled through her. "Find water, and something to eat." Tova nodded and disappeared. Alone again, Airless forced herself to stand and immediately regretted it. Her legs buckled, and she caught herself on the bedpost. "What have you done to me?" she asked the unconscious king. "What have we done to each other?" Because she could feel him now, in a way she couldn't explain. The bond pulsed between them like a second heartbeat, feeding her impressions of his dreams. Dark shapes, circling enemies, the constant weight of a crown. Even in sleep, he wasn't at peace. A soft groan drew her attention. The Alpha King was waking, his brow furrowing as consciousness returned. When his eyes opened, they were gray again, human and confused. He sat up slowly, pressing a hand to his side where the wound had been. Finding only smooth skin, his confusion deepened. His gaze swept the room, the blood-stained sheets, and finally settled on her. Then he stopped. His nostrils flared, and she watched color drain from his face. "Your scent," he breathed. "Why is your scent?" His eyes dropped to her throat, to the mark still visible despite its healing. Horror dawned across his features. "No, I wouldn't have." "You did." Airless pulled her hair aside. "You claimed me, last night, while the poison fever burned through you." He stared at her mark as if seeing his own death sentence. "I remember fragments. Golden light, and pain, and then—" He swallowed hard. "I thought I was dreaming. It wasn't a dream." He was on his feet instantly, backing away. "This changes nothing. The ritual, the barrier." "The ritual requires an unclaimed Omega." Airless was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "You've claimed me. Your own laws make the sacrifice void." She watched the realization hit him. The sacrifice he'd planned, the shield he'd acquired. It had all come undone because he couldn't control himself for one night. "Lord Varen," he said suddenly. "He'll demand we proceed anyway. He'll say the claim was involuntary, that it can be dissolved." "Can it?" The question hung between them, His jaw tightened. No, he admitted finally. A claiming bite is permanent. Even I can't undo what I've done to you. Strange how those words could sound like both a death sentence and a reprieve. You healed me, the king said, approaching cautiously. I remember that part. The light from your hands. How is that possible? This one does. Airless met his gaze. My mother called it the old gift, the ability to heal, to mend, to coax life where death takes hold. We've hidden it because those who possess it tend to disappear, taken by kings and warlords who want to use our power. Understanding flickered across his face. Like I wanted to use you. Like you wanted to use me. He turned away. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. I felt you. Inside me, fighting the poison. You could have let me die. He turned back, and his expression had changed. The cold calculation replaced by something rawer. Why didn't you? Because I'm a healer. Watching someone die when I have the power to save them goes against everything I am, even when that someone is my enemy. I'm not your enemy. You were planning to sacrifice me. I was planning to save my kingdom. His voice cracked. The barrier is failing. Without the ritual, thousands will die. I thought one life against thousands. You thought wrong. She saw him flinch. Good. But even as anger flared, she sensed his guilt through the bond, his desperation, the weight of every choice he'd made as king. Before she could respond, the door burst open. Tova stood in the doorway, face pale with terror. Soldiers, she gasped. Lord Varen's soldiers. They're saying the Omega bewitched the king. That she has to burn. The Alpha King's expression transformed instantly, all warmth vanishing beneath lethal authority. He stepped in front of Airlise, positioning his body between her and the door. Let them come, he growled, and his eyes flickered gold at the edges. Let them try to take what's mine. The soldiers never reached the door. Airless watched through the gap as the Alpha King stepped into the corridor, his presence alone enough to halt the armed men. Your Majesty. Lord Varen's voice slithered through the tension. Thank the gods you're unharmed. When we found your chambers empty and blood on the floor, we feared the worst. Did you? The Omega clearly used some form of dark magic too. The Omega saved my life. The king's voice cut like a blade. Someone poisoned my wine last night. The Omega found me dying and used her healing gift to burn the corruption from my blood. Silence. Healing gift? Lord Varen's tone shifted, calculating. I was not aware the Ashenmore bloodline carried such abilities. There is much you are not aware of, Lord Varen, including the security of my own household. The king paused. These soldiers will escort you to your chambers, where you will remain until I summon you. Anyone who attempts to enter the Omega's rooms without my permission will be executed. Your Majesty, the ritual will be discussed when I am satisfied that no further assassination attempts are forthcoming. Go. Footsteps retreated. Only when they faded did Airless allow herself to breathe. Later, she followed the king to a balcony overlooking the mountains. The morning air cut through the fever flush of her skin. Kalen. She tested his name, felt it roll across her tongue. Why did you agree to the sacrifice in the first place? He gripped the stone railing. The barrier protecting Valdris was created centuries ago, fueled by the willing sacrifice of an Omega Queen. My ancestor's mate. She gave her life to shield our people from the shadow beasts that pour through the mountain passes every winter. And now the barrier is failing. It's been failing for years. The seers said only a sacrifice of equal power could restore it. An Omega of ancient blood, bound to the ruling Alpha. Bound, you mean killed? Yes. His voice was hollow. I was willing to become a monster if that's what it took. I didn't expect to actually become one. You're not a monster. The words escaped before she could stop them. I tried to sacrifice you. You tried to save thousands of lives. The method was monstrous, but the intention... She shook her head. I know what it's like to make impossible choices. He stepped closer, and she felt heat between them spike. Not just her heat, but something answering it in him. I don't know how to be what you need, he admitted quietly. I've been king since I was 19. I've never had a mate. Never wanted one. I don't need gentle, I need honest. Then I'll be honest. He raised his hand slowly and brushed his fingers across the mark on her throat. Lightning traveled down her spine. Lord Varen won't stop. By claiming you, I've made you a target. I need to send you somewhere safe. A sanctuary in the eastern mountains. My mother's people. They'll protect you and your sister until this is over. You're sending me away. I'm trying to keep you alive. By separating us, the bond isn't finished. If you send me away now, it's not forever. A few weeks? Just until I've dealt with Varen. But even as he spoke, she sensed his doubt through the bond, his fear that weeks would become months. Promise me something, she said. Anything. Promise me you won't die before I see you again. He pulled her against him, one hand cradling the back of her head, and pressed his forehead to hers. I promise. He breathed against her lips. The kiss was nothing like she expected. Not demanding or possessive, but achingly tender. A promise sealed in warmth and wanting. When the guards came to escort her to the eastern passage, Airless went with the taste of him on her lips and the terrible certainty that she would never see him alive again. The sanctuary was a lie. Airless realized it 3 days into the journey, when the guards exchanged knowing glances and changed direction toward the northern pass. By then, it was too late. Lord Varen sends his regards, the captain said as they dragged her from the carriage. The king may have claimed you, but claims can be severed. They took her to a fortress carved into the mountainside, a place of black stone and perpetual shadow. Tova was ripped from her arms, dragged away to God's new where. Your sister will remain unharmed as long as you cooperate, Lord Varen assured her when he came to gloat. The ritual requires a willing sacrifice, after all. Or at least one who won't fight too hard. The king will come for me. The king believes you've reached the sanctuary safely. By the time he realizes the truth, the full moon will have passed. Varen smiled. Besides, His Majesty has other concerns. The shadow beasts attacked 3 villages last night. The barrier is failing faster than ever. Airless spent her first night in the cell reaching desperately through the bond. She could feel Kaelin, a distant warmth pulsing with concern. She tried to send him images, feelings, anything. But the connection was too new, too fragile. Something was blocking their communication. On the second night, the heat returned with a vengeance. It crashed over her in waves of fire, leaving her gasping on the cold stone floor. Without Kaelin nearby, without the bond properly completed, her body was tearing itself apart. Interesting, Varen observed through the bars. An incomplete bond during first heat. Quite agonizing, I'm told. Go to hell, Airless managed. On the third night, she discovered she wasn't alone. Airless. The whisper came from the cell beside hers. Can you hear me? Tova? She dragged herself to the wall. Are you hurt? I'm okay. Scared, but okay. Her sister's voice trembled. I heard the guards talking. They're doing the ritual tomorrow night. They have some artifact that can transfer the claiming mark. Make it so the sacrifice still works even though you're bonded. Airless's blood went cold. That's not possible. They said it was made by the same witch who created the original barrier. A severing artifact. Something that could break the bond by force. But bonds weren't just magical contracts. They were soul-deep connections. It'll kill us both, Airless whispered. If they break the bond violently, Kaelin will feel it. That's what they want. Tova's voice cracked. Varen said it was perfect. Kill you for the ritual. Kill the king through the backlash. Take power for himself. He's been sabotaging the barrier on purpose, Airless. All of it. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. The barrier wasn't failing naturally. It was being deliberately weakened. I have to warn him, Airless said. I have to. Another wave of heat slammed into her, and this time something cracked inside. She felt the Omega give way to something else. Something older and wilder sleeping in her blood. Her mother's gift. Rising now. Responding to the incomplete bond. Trying to compensate for what was missing. But without Kaelin, the power had nowhere to go. It was consuming her from within. Light spilled from her skin, golden and blinding. The guards shouted in alarm. And then, just before consciousness fled, she felt it. Kaelin. Through the bond, impossibly far away but suddenly, brilliantly clear. The surge of her power had burned through whatever was blocking them. She felt his rage as he finally understood. His terror as he felt her slipping away. His voice, howling through the connection. Hold on. Then darkness swallowed her whole. Airlys drifted in and out of consciousness. She was vaguely aware of movement, voices arguing above her. Lord Varen's cold commands. Guards dragging her somewhere. The scrape of stone and the smell of ancient magic. When she finally surfaced, she was strapped to an altar. The full moon blazed through a circular opening in the ceiling, bathing her in silver light. Around her, hooded figures chanted in a language older than kingdoms, and standing at the foot of the altar, holding a curved blade that glowed with dark energy, was Lord Varen. Ah, you're awake. He smiled down at her. I wanted you conscious for this. Kaelin will stop you. Your precious king is currently fighting for his life on the eastern border. The shadow beasts attacked in force tonight, almost as if someone told them exactly where to strike. Varen's smile widened. By the time he realizes the true threat is here, you'll be dead, and the barrier will be mine. The barrier will never answer to you. The barrier will answer to whoever holds the power. He raised the blade. Any last words? Airless thought of Tova. Thought of Kaelin, fighting impossible odds while she was murdered. Thought of the bond between them, still incomplete, still fighting to connect two souls that had barely begun to know each other. Yes, she said. You forgot something important. And what's that? I'm a healer. I sense wounds. And right now, I can sense exactly how much poison is still circulating through the bond from your assassination attempt. Varen's expression flickered. You're bluffing. Try to cut the bond. See what happens when you unleash all that corrupted energy at once. For the first time, uncertainty crossed the advisor's face. He turned to the hooded figures, demanding answers. Airless didn't know if she was bluffing. But every moment he hesitated was another moment for. The wall exploded. Stone and debris flew as something massive crashed through the ancient barriers. Airless caught a glimpse of silver fur and blazing gold eyes before the wolf tore into the hooded figures with savage efficiency. No, Varen screamed. The ward should have held. The wolf turned toward him, and in those golden eyes, Airless saw her mate. Kaelin's wolf form was enormous, twice the size of any natural beast. His silver fur was matted with blood, and she could feel through the bond exactly how far he'd run to reach her. Her power surge had given him her exact location. Varen raised the ritual blade, dark energy crackling along its edge. Stay back. One more step and I'll sever the bond. The wolf froze, and in that hesitation, Varen lunged, not toward Kaelin, but toward Airless. The blade came down. Airless felt it pierce her chest, felt dark magic trying to tear the bond apart. Pain beyond anything she'd experienced ripped through her, and somewhere distant, she heard Kaelin's howl of anguish. But even as the blade did its work, her healing gift surged forward one final time, not to save herself. She was too far gone. But the bond, the golden thread connecting her soul to Kaelin's, she could still protect it. She poured everything into that connection, wrapping it in light and love. Live, she sent through the bond. live, and remember me. Then the light faded, and Airless knew nothing more. Death was not what Airless expected. She drifted in a place between worlds, surrounded by silver mist and distant wolves howling. There was no pain here, only profound stillness. So this is it, she thought. This is how it ends. But even as the thought formed, something tugged at her consciousness. A thread of gold, pulsing weakly. The bond. Still. There. Still fighting. Airless. His voice, distant but desperate. Don't leave me, please. She felt his grief like a physical weight. Through the fading bond, she experienced his memories. A childhood of duty and isolation. A crown placed on shoulders too young to bear it. Years of sacrifice that had hollowed him out until he'd forgotten what it meant to want something for himself. Until her. You changed everything, his voice whispered. In days, you changed everything. And I was too much of a coward to tell you. Tell me what? Silence. Then, so soft she almost missed it, that I would have chosen you, over the kingdom, over the barrier, over everything. The confession shattered something inside her, not breaking, but breaking open. All the walls she'd built to survive, they crumbled before the raw truth of his love. And in that moment, her healing gift rose one final time. Not to mend flesh. This was deeper. The power recognized the bond, recognized the incomplete claiming. The bite, she realized. It was never finished. He claimed me, but I never claimed him back. In the waking world, she'd been too afraid, too convinced that what existed between them was coercion rather than choice. But here, in this space between life and death, there was no room for fear. I choose you, she sent through the bond with everything she had. Not because you claimed me, not because the bond demands it. Because you're the first person who ever saw what I truly am and wanted me anyway. The golden thread blazed with sudden brilliance. Kaelin knelt beside the altar, human again, cradling Airless's lifeless body. Varen's corpse lay crumpled against the far wall. The wolf had torn out his throat in the moment after the blade fell. But the victory meant nothing. She was gone. He could feel the bond dimming, feel her slipping away. Come back, he begged. Please, take my life instead. Take whatever you want. I love you, he whispered. Words he'd been too afraid to say. I love you, and I never told you, and now. Her eyes snapped open. Kaelin jerked back as golden light erupted from her body, so bright it forced him to shield his face. He heard stone cracking and ancient magic shattering. When the light faded, Airless was sitting up. But she wasn't looking at him with relief. She was looking at him with hunger. Airless? How? She moved faster than any Omega should be capable of, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. Her hands fisted in his blood-soaked shirt. You never let me finish, she said. Her voice was layered with something ancient. That night. You claimed me, but I never got to claim you back. Understanding dawned. The bond is incomplete. That's why we've both been suffering. Her eyes were golden now. I'm going to fix that. Unless you tell me to stop. Don't stop. The words came out raw, desperate. Don't ever stop. She kissed him first, deep and fierce, pouring days of longing into the press of her lips. He responded with equal fervor, trying to pull her impossibly closer. Then her mouth found his throat, and her teeth sank deep. The claiming burned through him like wildfire, remaking him from the inside out. He felt her presence flood every corner of his soul, felt the bond complete itself with a resonance that shook the mountain's foundations. They were no longer two people. They were one being in two bodies. When Airless finally released him, they collapsed together, foreheads pressed together. I felt you die, he whispered. For 37 seconds you were gone. I know. She cupped his face. I felt everything you felt. All of it. I meant every word. I know that too. She kissed him softly. I love you, Kaelin. Not because of magic or bonds or fate, because you kept your promise about my sister. Because you felt guilty for what you'd planned. Because somewhere beneath all that ice, you have the warmest heart I've ever known. They found Tova in the fortress dungeons, shaken but unharmed. The girl took one look at her sister, at the golden light still flickering in Airless's eyes, and burst into tears. You're different, Tova whispered. Everything's changed. Airless looked over her sister's head to meet Kaelin's gaze, but some changes are worth making. 1 month later, the barrier shimmered with renewed strength, not from sacrifice, but from something else entirely. Airless stood at its heart, golden light flowing from her palms. The seers were wrong, she said, as Kaelin watched from the doorway. The barrier never needed death. It needed life. Healing. Will it hold? For another 1,000 years. She turned to face him. Long enough for our children to find a better solution. Our children? A smile tugged at his lips. Is that a promise? It's a certainty. She crossed to him, sliding into his arms. I've seen it through the bond. Our future is bright. Brighter than either of us dared to hope. He kissed her forehead, breathing in her scent. Moonlight and healing and home. I was going to use you as a shield, he murmured. A sacrifice to save my kingdom. I know. I never expected to fall in love with you. I know that too. She pulled back to meet his eyes. But you did. And I fell in love with you. And somehow, we found our way to this. To what? She smiled, and the expression held all the warmth of 1,000 suns. To home, she said simply. We found our way home. Outside the chamber, the wolves of Valdris lifted their voices in celebration. And as the Alpha King held his Omega Queen, both finally understood what the ancient bond had known from the first moment. They had always been destined for each other. The sacrifice, the claiming, the death and resurrection. It had all been leading here. Two broken souls made whole by love, not a shield, not a sacrifice, a mate, a partner, a forever. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you'd like to hear more tales of fated mates and fierce love, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to share more adventures with you.